My name is Ethan, and I work in a car repair shop located in an unremarkable town in Ohio. The owner is John Miller, who also works in the store with me. He is a low-key, middle-aged man, introverted, and doesn't talk much. Basically, apart from work, I just stay at home or go fishing in the river. It was a night in October 2022. Because I had an urgent job, I was still working in a car repair shop. Under the dim lights in the store, oily tools and car parts were scattered all over the floor. Suddenly, I heard some strange noises. At first, I thought it was the wind blowing something, but soon I realized it was the sound of metal scraping and knocking, like someone working on a car. I looked around, and there was no one in the garage except me. I walked quietly towards the source of the sound, my heart beating faster and faster. The sound seemed to come from deep in the workshop, where some abandoned old cars were piled up. I approached an old Chevy and noticed the hood was slightly open, as if someone had just been working there. But the surroundings were silent, and there was no sign of anyone. I tried turning on the lights in the workshop, but the switch seemed to have malfunctioned, leaving only a faint light coming through the window. I fumbled for a flashlight and shined the light into the vehicle, but there was no one inside. "Who's there?" But no one responded. Maybe a rat, I thought to myself. At this time, I heard another low sigh, as if someone was next to me. I turned around sharply, but there was nothing behind me. My heart was beating wildly. At that moment, I felt unprecedented fear, as if something was peeping at me in the darkness, waiting for the opportunity. The car repair shop seems to have become another world late at night. Shadows squirmed in the corners of the workshop, and every slight sound echoed in the silent space. I felt like my breathing became heavy, and my chest felt as if there was a huge stone pressing on it. I tried to convince myself that these were just night visions, perhaps hallucinations caused by fatigue. I hurriedly left the old Chevy, but my pace quickened unconsciously, almost turning into a trot. When I got back to the front desk, I sat back in my chair and tried to calm myself down. However, the invisible feeling of oppression did not disappear. I looked around, and it seemed like every corner contained some unknown secret. I suddenly felt that every object in this car repair shop, the tools and vehicles that had accompanied me in my work over the years, had become strange and terrifying. As much as I hate to admit it, I know it's probably more than just my imagination. Over the years, John had avoided talking about the store's past, always leaving in a hurry when it got dark. Now I began to wonder if he knew something and felt these ineffable things. I decided to stay and observe for a night to see if I could figure out the source of the sounds and anomalies. I turned off most of the lights, leaving only one lamp as a weak source of light. Sitting in the dim space, I felt as if time had frozen. Every minute felt like an eternity, and I was trapped in this silent cage. Sitting in the dark car repair shop, time seemed to slow down. I tried to focus on the anomaly in the darkness, but my ears seemed to be filled with sounds. The wind blew through the closed doors and windows, carrying an inexplicable wail. However, just when I thought everything had calmed down, the voice came back. This time it wasn't coming from an old car, but it was coming from deep within the walls of the garage. It was a dull and intensifying knocking sound, accompanied by the sound of metal scraping the ground. I gripped the edge of the table tightly, feeling my palms begin to sweat. My eyes groped helplessly in the darkness, searching for any possible explanation. Suddenly, a gust of cold wind blew by, making me shiver. I stared into the dark corner, and something seemed to be moving there. My heart was beating fast, and my throat felt dry. I stood up and walked slowly and carefully towards the source of the sound. Every step was like crossing an invisible boundary, taking me into unknown territory. As I approached the corner, I noticed an old toolbox there, thrown carelessly on the ground, as if someone had used it in a hurry. I bent down and opened the toolbox with trembling hands. The tools inside were in disarray, as if they had been hastily rummaged through. I was about to stand up and leave when suddenly, I felt a presence. At that moment, I felt something standing behind me, watching me quietly. I turned around but saw nothing. My heart was beating faster and faster, and my whole body felt like it was soaked in ice water, and I was shivering with cold. I walked back to the table and tried to catch my breath. I told myself that this was just my imagination and there could be nothing in this old car repair shop. However, the voice inside me told me that something was indeed wrong here. I recall that John always left early to avoid spending the night. I thought about the unexplained sounds and the unsettling atmosphere. Suddenly, a harsh sound broke the silence. A car started without anyone operating it. I turned around and saw the old Chevrolet's lights on and its engine roaring. I stood there and couldn't believe my eyes. I slowly approached the car, my heart beating fast. I reached out to touch the car door, and the cold metal made me shiver involuntarily. I took a deep breath and opened the car door. There was no one inside, but the car continued to run. I looked around and saw other abnormalities. At this time, the roar came down. Just as I was about to close the door, I noticed something under the passenger seat. I knelt down and found that it was an old diary. I picked it up and quickly returned to the light at the front desk. When I opened it, the handwriting on the notebook was blurred, but I could still make out some words. It was more of a record of a person's work than a diary. The diary is signed Miller. I thought to myself, could this be John's work record? But he doesn't seem to have a habit of recording. Holding that old, tattered diary tightly in my hands, I felt the peak of confusion and panic in my heart. I decided to go find John, needing him to explain everything. Carrying the diary, I hastily left the auto repair shop and drove to John's house. It was already midnight, and the entire town was immersed in the tranquility of the night, with only my vehicle moving through the deserted streets. When I arrived at John's house, I noticed that the lights were still on inside. I knocked on the door, and John's voice came from inside, sounding tired. I told him everything I had found at the auto repair shop, including that diary. John's face instantly turned pale, and he took the dusty diary into his hands, his expression becoming increasingly heavy. "This is my father's diary." John's voice was low and choked, as if carrying endless pain and regret. "Many years ago, one night, my father had an accident in the auto repair shop and lost his life. I have never been able to forgive myself because that night, I should have been watching over the shop, but I was being reckless, and I slipped away." John narrated the events of that night, his voice filled with pain and self-blame. I listened, feeling waves of heartache and sympathy. In his storytelling, I began to understand the voice and the visions in the auto repair shop. When I left, the sky was already starting to lighten. I felt a sense of closure, as if waking up from a long dream. That old auto repair shop, and the hidden stories within it, would forever remain in my memory.